your own home, and you begin to worry because you're not there yet. This can be a really intense source of insecurity because when you are too far behind in the game of life, it really makes you feel immature, and feeling immature when you're in your 20s or 30s is a lot different from feeling immature when you're a teenager. It's one thing to be a sort of juvenile goofball, it's something very different to be a man-child. The fifth truth about getting older is that you start to experience more physical decay. This can often be the most shocking thing when it happens to you because it is the most stereotypical old person thing. You know, we tend to think that physical decay only happens to you when you're like 100 years old, but no, it actually starts to manifest when you're quite young. As you get older, you inevitably start to develop some weird adult health problems. Stuff like back and joint pain, or maybe something to do with your blood pressure or your cholesterol, or something with your heart or your lungs or your eyes, or maybe something to do with your weight. And in a lot of cases, this might result in you not being able to do quite as many physical things as you used to, or at least being very cautious about them in a way you never had to be when you were young, which can be a pretty crippling feeling. The sixth truth about getting older is that you start to have a new form of concern about the way that you dress. See, an inescapable part of getting older is worrying that you are trying too hard to look young. When you're young, you can wear whatever, because young people look cool in anything. But at some unclear point, dressing cool starts to mean dressing immature, which means you have to suddenly figure out some way to dress and look in tune with the times without also looking like you're in denial about how old you actually are. This is obviously a bigger issue for women than men, but I think it's pretty hard to get away from no matter what your gender. The seventh truth about getting older is that you start to have a lot more nostalgia. Now, I will admit that this one is a big problem for me personally. It's very easy for me to get nostalgic because I had a pretty happy childhood, so I tend to get pretty easily obsessed with happy memories of when I was younger and more carefree. The problem is that as I get older, those happy memories become further and further in the past, which means A, I don't remember them as well, so it is very easy to imagine that they were better than they probably were, and B, I get sad about how long ago it was that they happened. I remember when I was young, I used to often get annoyed with my father because he would spend a lot of time reminiscing about how things were when he was my age. But now I find that I'm often doing this whenever I talk to kids. And lastly, number 8 is you find yourself growing increasingly bored and cynical of current events. People, generally speaking, get more conservative as they get older, and it's easy to assume that this is just because older people cling to outdated opinions. But I think another part of it is that as you get older, you just tend to get a lot less idealistic because you realize how little things actually change over time. People often ask me what I think about Donald Trump, and honestly, a lot of the time I'm just kind of like, whatever. Because I've now seen several times in both Canada and America what always happens whenever a new leader comes to power from either party. Whenever a right-wing guy comes to power, the left goes bananas and says it's the end of the world. And whenever a left-wing guy gets elected, the right goes bananas and says it's the end of the world. And it's not just politics. Living longer means you start to realize just how predictable a lot of the news is and people's reactions to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll wind up as a cranky right-winger, but it does mean that you will probably start to get pretty good at tuning out a lot of headlines. So yeah, those are 8 truths about getting older for you. Let me know in the comments if you particularly related to any of them, or let me know if I missed any big ones. Obviously, we all experience getting older in different ways, and some of us have an easier time with it than others. And obviously, there are a lot of people for whom getting older is pretty great, because it means escaping a youth that was much worse. But I do think overall, the aging process is something that we do not talk openly and honestly about nearly enough, because it's tough. In that sense, I hope this video has been useful.